project, right? Well, I think there are a lot of companies that see the opportunity in e-commerce, but have tried something small without a lot of organizational weight behind, without a lot of organizational focus and budget. And when we look at any successful e-commerce initiative, it is not a project. It is an ongoing program. It may be composed of individual projects, so your launch project or your loyalty program project or your punch-out project, but you need to look at it as a program with a roadmap where over time you're going to constantly improve the capabilities based on, at a point in time, understanding what your customers are looking for and providing it to them. And we've seen that with all the most successful companies.
So Graham, I wanted to start with a couple of things I've seen you write recently. You wrote about being invited to speak to a board, a manufacturer distribution board. You can tell us which it was. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to hear about. I'm mainly curious to hear, like, how did you approach that conversation? Like, how did you change your language to talk the language that the board would understand versus talking to like a digital team that you might be used to?
Mm-hmm. Okay. You said you'll start with curveballs. That definitely wasn't on my card of questions for today. But yeah, perfect. It's a company that we're working with. They're PE backed. They are going through a very large digital transformation. And the reason they're going through it is because while they're nine figures in revenues, they haven't updated their underlying platform in 20 plus years. So we're working with them to essentially do a complete digital transformation, very customer centric, but we're also touching on order management and product information management and building out a lot of the integration layer as well between their different systems. And the CEO asked me to come join the board meeting to give an outside perspective on where we are along the timeline of the digital transformation. Fortunately, we're in a really good spot. Otherwise, it might have been a bit of an uncomfortable board meeting. But we've been working with this company for the last 6 months. Initially, we did a lot of strategic review, analysis of the existing systems, identifying opportunities for transformation, and now we're really heads down in the actual engineering and integration phase. It took quite a lot of prep, but it allowed us to really present to the board a picture of where we are, what has to come still, and an overview of where the risks and issues were. And while the board is composed of mostly the business side of the house, they definitely had have some very sharp technologists on as well that have gone through these sorts of transformations. So they were able to ask challenging questions as well around where we were and where we saw the obstacles.
Talking to that type of group, though, that's probably pretty diverse, as you pointed out. Some kind of bigger technologists, others had to be challenging to make sure you're talking at the right level, right? Not too high level, not too technical. How did you balance that as you prepared?
Typically, I prefer to talk at it from a program management or a business level and the business implications. And then if anybody in the conversation wants to go deeper into the technology levels, I'm comfortable going there. I think of myself as being able to bridge the gap between business and technology and being able to discuss technology from a business perspective, because that's really what we do. We're not technologists for technology's sake. Our focus is on helping our customers implement technology to move their business forward, not because it's the latest shiny technology.
I have a follow-up on that, though, because I think there's so many... There typically exists this kind of chasm or fracture between the executive team and digital teams so much. And so much of that fracture is communication, a lack of communication. So kind of two sides. One is the digital team really struggles to translate what they're doing into business terms, into the organizational terms, the organizational strategic initiatives. And then the executive team doesn't want to look stupid too. right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're so often not able to ask those next level questions of, hey, like, why is this number up or down? Because often they don't even understand the numbers, and often they don't understand the numbers because the digital teams talked in a language they didn't understand. So it's just this constant kind of back and forth, which leads to executives really not making this strategic, right? A strategic initiative, digital in general, a strategic initiative. And it leaves the digital team not getting the resources that it wants or needs. So that communication is so critical. You're so good at being able to translate technical things into business terms. What would you say, or any advice to the director of digital or VP of digital or VP of e-commerce in how to approach that and how to kind of change how they communicate? Any words of advice for them?
Well, I think at the board level, it's usually going to be based on financial performance.
Hmm.
What's the impact going to be, either top of line or bottom line? How are you going to impact revenues? How are you going to reduce costs? Where are you going to get the operational efficiencies? And being able to look at the overall project or program from that perspective. If you're going through a digital transformation and focus just on the technology, I think you're missing a really important
Doing it wrong.
part of it. Yeah, you have to start out with the strategy, and I think the strategy is, which markets do we want to go into? Which markets do we want to increase market share? How do we want to improve our customer experience? How do we want to change the dynamics of certain parts of our business? It could be we want to give customers more customer self-service. We want to lock in customers' spend with us. And based on the goals, you can then figure out what tactics you need to implement. And then based on what tactics you want to implement, you can then figure out which technologies are going to support those tactics. So it really always is going to flow either up to, this is going to help us drive more revenues, or this is going to help us take costs out of the operations. And then it's aligning against those. And very often what we see is the digital side is underfunded. Like, I know cry me a river, it's like everybody hears that, but it may be underfunded because there is not sufficient value being communicated for doing the initiative. So if you're saving tens of millions of dollars, a portion of that in the millions could be very reasonable for the board to sign off on, or the executive team to sign off on. But you have to be able to understand what the value prop's going to be, and then from that value prop and the ROI, then you can figure out what it's expected to cost, what it's worth.
I think it's worth it too to have, build those as the things you're reporting on. I think so often we report on digital things like digital people. I mean, in the B2C world, I find it's a lot easier. I think there's the terms, the technology is easier to understand. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's easier to understand, and maybe not easier to understand. There's more education, there's more kind of adoption and strategic initiatives that you can be a little more technical in how you report. In the B2B world, I think we can't afford to do that. We've got to oversimplify what we're doing, put it in business terms, like you said. Like, I love that idea of reporting everything at the finance level. I don't think there's a lot of heads of e-commerce that report at a financial level. They don't treat it as their own P&L or even influence on the P&L in general. Yeah. I think we tend to report on kind of e-commerce things versus business things.
Yeah, I think it is easier to do that in the B2C world than the B2B. Because in the B2B world, you're touching a lot of different areas with the transformation. You're touching customer support. You're touching sales. You're touching just all over the place within the organization. And it's sometimes difficult to figure out what the true value is going to be of a transformation at a purely financial level. So they have to be both the hard costs as well as the soft costs and soft savings that you're going to get out of it.
Well, it kind of leads into the fact that this is, our level of complexity is so different in the B2B world, right? Yeah. I think there's complex businesses that we work in, complex customers, complex products, complex buying processes. And I know you've seen this. You and I have talked about this many times, the complexity. How do you start to address that complexity, whether it's with your customers directly or the executive teams? How do you start to address some of that complexity?
I think it all goes back to understanding the client's business because the different businesses are going to have very different complexity levels. So, for example, if you're working with a distributor that works in the safety space, as an example, MRO type safety supplies, their complexity is very different to a manufacturer of OEM parts for safety, safety trucks and ambulances and
Mm-hmm.
fire trucks and those sorts of things. So when we look at those two types of businesses on the MRO supply, there is complexity because there are lots of different ways that you can actually reach the customer, whether it's through an Ariba for purchasing or a punch out system tied in there, or EDI or sales reps or on site vending machines for MRO products. So we've got customers that sell online, but they also have vending machines in large manufacturing facilities where somebody can get safety gloves out. So that's a type of complexity, which is very different from one of our customers that sells into the fire truck space. So
Mm.
pumps and nozzles and hoses and monitors. Their complexity is they don't sell directly to any customers, but they sell to the fabricators and the individuals that are responsible for speccing their products. So they've got very different metrics that they measure their businesses on. They've got very different ways of interacting with the customers. So the client that works on fire trucks, they actually don't care about conversion rate because they've got no conversion rate to track. Somebody comes to their site, they use their information for speccing. And when I say conversion rate, I mean add to cart and checkout. But somebody comes to their site as part of a speccing process where they are trying to determine what's the best equipment to refit a truck or build a new truck. That information then gets used as part of the design process, and it's probably 6 or 9 months later that anybody makes a purchase from them as part of that buying. But the challenge for us in building out the portals then is how do we help facilitate getting the information when a designer needs that information, and
Mm-hmm.
then how do we help them after they've built the truck and they need spare parts to buy those spare parts either directly or through a channel. So very different to the MRO supplier that needs to make sure they've got inventory available that can be sent same day out to a customer, or that they're monitoring their vending machine as a remote inventory location, and all that information is then consolidated within a single account and all the billing and everything. So very different sorts of dynamics, and that I think is one of the areas that makes B2B really interesting. You just don't see that complexity in direct to consumer.
Well, talk about that difference because I think the difference between manufacturing and just distributors, like
Mm.
even if you kind of look cross industry, e-commerce typically falls like traditional e-commerce as we think about it traditionally is a distribution channel more than it is in manufacturing for that reason. What do the manufacturers that you work with, like how do they think about e-commerce?
It's going to vary on the industry and the types of products. I'm seeing that a lot of the manufacturers want to continue selling through their distribution partners because those distribution partners often can bring a scale of advice in the selling cycle as well as points of presence for same day fulfillment on some products. Then you've got others that are starting to say, can I sell directly to some of these end customers for products that are maybe a challenge for distributors to stock
Mm.
because they move so seldomly, but I can stock them as a manufacturer because they're going to only be requested periodically, but I can keep some of that inventory and I can distribute nationally for it. Different dynamics. I think the distributors are starting to do white label manufacturing of a lot of products and selling those. So they become sort of these hybrid manufactured distributors.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the manufacturers are saying, well, I don't need to use a distribution channel for my whole product catalog. I can maybe do some direct to customer for some of it as well. It's really interesting dynamics.
I think back 10 years ago, Graham, and I think what a lot of the industry said was manufacturers, you can just go direct,
Mm.
right? And they were kind of, it was kind of an exaggerated view of you can go to direct with everything. And what I hear you saying is distributors play a valuable part of the supply chain, right? You talked about local
Absolutely.
inventory, credit, and then you talked about expertise. And I do think it's interesting that a lot of companies aren't talking about channel conflict as much anymore. It's more about the business case that you just laid out with, which is these product categories go really well through distribution. These product categories may not have a distribution play. There might not be customers that buy from distributors in there. It might be a new channel, it might be a new category, whatever it might be for whatever reasons. But you don't really hear as much about the channel conflict problem anymore because I think companies have kind of come to terms with what's best for the customer to flow through distribution versus what isn't. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. We're still hearing conversations around some of the manufacturers that want to sell direct to customers, that they're concerned about upsetting their distribution channel
Yeah,
going
yeah,
direct. They definitely are.
yeah. They definitely care. I just don't see it as much of like it's not as much people challenging that idea anymore versus deciding, okay, these are the kind of things that go best through distribution. In our first part of this, you talked about sometimes it's easier to have conversations in B2C versus B2B. From your perspective, what are the differences and why is it, what are the major differences between B2B and B2C commerce from your perspective?
I think there's a long list of them, but in the B2B side, you have to deal with not, or let me actually start on the B2C side. In the B2C side, you typically have a pretty core group of decision makers, say head of e-commerce. And head of e-commerce is responsible for the online channel. And yes, there's a fulfillment side of it and there's a product content side of it. But when you look at B2B, you typically have a lot more sales channels that are in the mix. You've got a lot of purchasing types. You've got a lot of different customer types. The buyer behavior is very different, as opposed to an individual placing a purchase based on their desires and reviews. Very often in the B2B, it's a multi-step process. It's first let me get the information from the site. Then let me review the information and make sure that it meets my specifications. Then I'm going to go through purchasing, and purchasing is going to support that. And then the payment terms are going to be X months down the line, or the tax requirements are going to be tax exempt versus tax. There are just so many different touch points to consider in the B2B world compared to what we see in the B2C. And it's not to say that there can't be some complex B2C implementations, because we definitely have done those. But in general, when you start introducing business buyers, you have to consider payment terms, you have to consider getting them on board, you have to get tax exempt, different pricing sheets. There's just so many different variables.
How does it shape strategy, technology, selection, process? How do those differences shape what you actually can do and actually do with manufacturers and distributors versus the B2C world?
I think again it goes back to gathering figuring out the strategy and gathering the requirements to implement it. Typically, when we're doing B2C, the requirements are significantly less dense than the requirements for B2B.
Mm.
And the exception cases are significantly fewer than in the B2B. It always astounds me how the difference of something like returns can be handled for B2B versus B2C. And we're working with a very well-known direct-to-consumer brand, and we're asking them about post-order edits and changes, and how we would have to do integration into their back into their order management and financial systems to accommodate it. And they said, if we can't fulfill it, we cancel the order. It either ships out within 24 hours or we cancel the order and we refund the customer their money. That never happens.
Never.
Ever in B2B. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Every single B2B customer that we work with has a post-order edit process in place. There are changes that are going to happen. And that to me is like one of the really big differences. And that results in a lot more discovery being needed around after the order is placed, what has to happen, versus in the direct-to-consumer world. There's some pretty well-defined processes around returns, return receipts, credits, credit memos, RMAs, all those sorts of things. Haven't found them well-defined in the B2B space.
Well, and because in B2B, a rollback of a return, like the return part's nothing, right? The actual, I give you a product, you want to return it, the product ends back, right? But a couple of things happen with that. Like, first of all, how do you know when a product hits the bay again or the dock, how do people know it's a return versus something that was shipped from the manufacturer? I mean, you have that level, like the kind of back end reverse logistics. You have the rollback of, like, does it need to go back to the manufacturer because it's faulty? Does it stay here on the shelf? Because these are often very complex products, sometimes with safety concerns, with problems. Mm-hmm. Was it returned because it just needs to be restocked? Or is it a return because there's something faulty? And then the whole rollback of like rebates and things like that. Like there is a sequence of events that happen on a return in B2B that is not anywhere near what it is in the B2C world, especially when you're working with trying to return it back to the distributor and then figure out, how do I get this back to the manufacturer if that's appropriate? Yeah,
very, super complex. And for a lot of the projects that we work on, where the customer hasn't a well-defined front-end process, doesn't have a well-defined, and this is on the B2B side, doesn't have a well-defined customer-facing self-service infrastructure, and we're brought in to help them mature that capability. A lot of that information exists in people's sort of knowledge, individuals' knowledge bases, right? It's like, well, go ask Mark. He does this. He'll give you the details of it, which that's part of discovery.
That's right. But Graham, with that, even when you just say it's part of discovery, there's a skill of being able to ask the right questions in the B2B world that's different than the B2C world. Because in the B2B world, you're trying to uncover things based off of your experience with other manufacturers and distributors. The manufacturing world is completely different from the distribution world, even though they say they share an ecosystem and share a supply chain, which means you have to ask questions that are very informed questions. Like how have you guys kind of built that muscle inside your organization to even be able to ask the right questions?
I think a lot of it comes from the experience of doing it. Our strategy team, business analysts, have been working in this space for at least a decade. So when we start with a new client, it's not like we're coming in for the first time. We see a lot of the same problems and the same processes, or similar problems, company to company. So we're able to leverage a lot of those learnings. I'll give a plug to the B2B eCommerce Association. I love the certifications that you all are doing, because it will help as a whole agencies ask better questions, because the teams going in are more informed.
Mm-hmm.
on the sales side, it's other agencies now know what to ask and realize that these aren't trivial problems and they aren't small projects when doing the digital transformation. So I think across the board, it comes down to experience and people that have done it before, shown up and asking the right questions because they've been through these sessions before and they've seen the results as well. Having worked on projects and done the post-project reviews, understanding what was captured, what wasn't captured. I'll give you an example. We're working with a manufacturer right now, and they have a lot of distributors that for the same part, it's in the plumbing space, and for the same parts, each of their distributors has a different SKU number, and they've got their master SKU, but the distributors have their own identifiers for all the products. And they want to be able to look up on the manufacturer's site available inventory and ex-factory dates and those sorts of things. So one of the requirements we're working through is giving search capabilities where SKUs are associated to individual customers that reconcile against the master SKU. Mm. Interesting edge case. But we've actually seen it before as well. It's not the first time we've seen it.
Yeah, it's a cross-reference of sort, but a cross-reference to somebody else's SKU number instead of a competitor. Do you find this is at least where it was 5 years ago, Graham, is that often the approach in B2C can be sit down with a customer, ask them, what do you want? Let's just kind of work through the different categories. What do you want? In the B2B world, when you ask that question, you don't get good answers. And so often it's about one of two things. One, kind of explaining what something is, and then working through whether it's needed for that customer, or a set of customers, along with kind of journey mapping and stuff like that. And the other part of that was like, hey, most companies like you do this. Let me tell you what it is. Is that something that works? So it's definitely a more assertive approach of, I think you're probably going to need this too, even though we haven't talked about it. Has that changed, or do you find yourself doing kind of more of that educational, assertive approach? Or
there's always this balance between relying on the customer to have a fully formed vision of what they want and knowledge of the requirements, and helping to craft those requirements based on what's possible, right? And I think that's actually very challenging, but it's really critical because up front, you've got the opportunity to help them craft a differentiated offering and something that customers really want. And very often when you're on client side and you are deep in the trenches, you know what your systems can do, you know what your processes are today. You often want to just make it a little bit better, a little bit more automated on the new platform. And I think that really misses the opportunity when you're doing a digital transformation, because your digital transformations aren't going to come across or happen all that often. Is it every 5 years, every 10 years? With some clients every 20 years. So when you've got that opportunity, I think it's really important to look at what's the art of the possible. If we're implementing a new technology, what can we do to significantly improve our customer experience, to significantly reduce operational costs? And if you're looking at it that way, the requirements aren't easily defined. You have to think about, where do we want to get to, and what would the requirements look like to get there? And that's difficult, because you have to get a collective vision of where you want to go and sell something that isn't just a bit better than what you have to. That's something significantly better.
I've found that some of the most successful VP of e-commerce that are able to make digital strategic inside their organization, that achieve a seat at the table, at the executive table, are the ones that are less about technology. They're more about, they own the customer journey. There's this really cool opportunity for leaders in e-commerce that no one typically owns the customer journey inside your organization. No one's like mapped it start to finish, mapped what the purchasing, the discovery, the quoting, the post delivery process. They haven't mapped all that out. And those in digital actually can use their skill sets and map this customer journey out. As you do that, you start to identify, here are the holes that we have, right? And then be able to communicate what the holes are in the customer experience. Not a digital hole, but a hole that needs to be plugged or filled in or covered over, or a bridge built over, whatever it might be for that. And I just see that as a significant opportunity. And so even if you might not know the right questions to ask about e-commerce, if you're bringing in someone like Wasserman in your organization, you would be able to communicate, this is our customer journey.
Yeah.
These are our opportunities. And then that becomes so much of a more collaborative space between you and them versus just kind of asking questions and doing discovery and things like that.
I have tremendous respect for client executives that are able to paint a vision internally of where a transformation is going to go, and then get the organization aligned to move in the direction that they're proposing. It's not easy. There's a lot of change management goes into it.
That's right.
There's a lot of communication and salesmanship that goes into it. So I've got tremendous respect for the large organizations and the sponsors of projects that are able to move it forward, able to keep everybody aligned, not just at the initial sale and the initial budgeting, but month 9, month 18, when these big projects are taking a lot of time to really realize the overall goals.
Wasserman is known as a company that truly does understand this very complex world of B2B e-commerce. Tell us a little bit about Wasserman, what you're doing, what type of customers you solve and the problems you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Well, Wasserman as a whole is about 5,000 people, global offices throughout the world. And within Wasserman Digital, we have a real focus on digital capabilities, digital transformation. We work in the realm of e-commerce. We also work in general digital and experiential. But Wasserman as a whole has really two main groups. One is the talent side of the house, and the other side is the marketing side. And we're on the marketing side. Within the overall Wasserman world, really innovative organization. When you go and watch an NFL game and you see the Microsoft tablets on the sidelines, Wasserman helped structure that deal and built and worked with Microsoft and the NFL to build out all the technology to show those tablets on the sidelines. So it's a really innovative organization. Then when we look at the Wasserman Digital team, we work with other sister agencies to realize their digital vision, but our core focus in our go-to-market is on how do we help companies transform their e-commerce world. And a lot of that is focused on manufacturers, distributors, but we also work with a lot of direct-to-consumer brands as well on bringing their products to market.
What percentage of your business is on the B2B side? Manufacturers and distributors?
Probably about 60%.
Yeah.
Maybe even 70%.
Majority.
Yeah.
What was your journey to Wasserman, Graham?
I started out working for Accenture as an engineer. My first project was with a large airline, building out a billing system.
In what language?
It was in C, not C sharp,
not C++.
C.
C. Regular C. This is how we learn, Graham. Like you and me, it was COBOL and C. That's what we learned in for all these young kids out here now.
Yeah. I was actually the first class at what it used to be at Anderson Consulting. It's now Accenture. I was the first class to learn C. Before that, everybody was on COBOL. So I learned C, worked on a billing system for an airline, essentially it was this miscellaneous billing where if they overbought maraschino cherries for the first class sundaes that they were offering, they could then put these out for sale. And it was all of the billing processes around selling those products. Pretty obscure, but
Mm-hmm.
back then it was really innovative, client server interfaces. And so from Accenture, I got my MBA at Kellogg. While there, I wrote a business plan for a logistics software as a services company, which was one of the first ones out in the market, called Solarix. The product essentially would give you visibility to your supply chain. So everything from manufacturing purchase orders cut to a factory, and then seeing those shipments move throughout the supply chain, through shipping, through customs, through distribution centers onto a final location. After that, I stayed in the software space for probably about 8 years, working on enterprise SaaS, more in the construction space. So did product management and program management for a company in that area before coming back to the agency and consulting world, which I've always loved. And started a agency called Akaran. I think we're about 14 years ago. And Akaran focused on e-commerce, ended up getting acquired by a private equity firm, then getting acquired by Wasserman, and have been with Wasserman for close to 4 years now.
Okay. How do you say the name of that company?
Akaran.
Yeah. How do you spell it?
ACCORIN.
Okay. ACCORIN.
Nice. We're better at technology than naming. That's definitely what you've realized. It came from acquire, convert, retain. So the fundamentals of e-commerce.
Yeah.
So the intent was good behind it, but it's never been a name to be easily pronounced.
I like it though. I like it. What's your favorite thing about your job?
I love working with clients on that intersection of business and technology. It's problem solving. It's understanding their businesses, understanding what they're looking to do, being able to bring my experience on the business side as well as on the technology side, and help craft that vision and then move it forward. And I was talking to somebody the other day. It's like, I love making clients heroes, making the project successful, which means they're successful, and it comes across as a resounding success. And what I've realized, it's not easy. Like, there are so many moving parts in these big projects that it's not easy to do, but it's very rewarding.
What did you want to, when you were in high school, and this job didn't exist back in high school, because I know it didn't exist, because we're in the same age range. What did you want to be? What did you want to be in high school, or kind of going into college? What did you think you were going to be?
I could give you 30 guesses, but I'll jump to the punch. I want to be a game ranger.
A game engineer?
I want to be a game ranger.
Oh, game ranger.
A park ranger, yeah.
I have a friend who's a park.
First love.
I have a friend who's a park ranger.
Yeah.
Who did that?
That was my first love. I love being outdoors. So that was my first. Then got to college and debated an anthropology professor, and I ended up in technology.
So you ended up a developer. Did you go to school for computer science?
No, I went for business. But when I joined Accenture at the time, they made everybody do some level of coding.
Right.
And I did it kicking and screaming. I really didn't want to do it. But they sent us through a pretty long boot camp on C. And I realized that it has been the most important learning that I've had in my career. It has allowed me to really understand how systems work, especially in large organizations, how data flows between different systems, and the importance of understanding those data flows to really being able to solve any problems. So I think that was a pretty foundational learning of mine, and I'm very grateful that I was able to do that. I think another foundational learning was setting up the program management office for a large ERP transformation, which at the time There's something like 80 consultants working on it, and across a lot of different work streams. And setting up the program management office for this engagement allowed me to really understand how do you get a lot of different teams working together? What sort of metrics do you need to use and put in place to be able to see when you're going off track? So if you've got a small project, you can easily sense the impact. But when you've got a larger transformation, you need more sophisticated tools, whether it's program management or earned value or different work streams, different independent milestones. And that was really transformational for me as well. Really, really important.
I think some of the best people have come out of ERP because I think ERP to commerce, because I think in ERP you learn all of the intricacies of supply chain and inventory and pricing. You realize how complex it is. You actually get to see these departments, even if they're just represented in numbers and kind of modules. You get to see how they're all put together. I think it's an interesting fast track to this. I don't think there's a lot of people going directly into ERP anymore versus other things, but I think some of the best people. What is Wasserman's kind of ideal customer look like?
Typically, it's going to be manufacturer, distributor, direct to consumer, sub $1 billion in revenues. I mean, we do work with over $1 billion, but I think in the sub $1 billion revenue range, we're able to work with them and really move the needle on the digital transformation activities. We have an international teams. I'm based in the US, but that's pretty much the profile.
Do you guys find yourself in a stronger position with manufacturing versus distributors, or distributors versus manufacturing? Is there a preference on that, or in any industries that you find yourselves just kind of integrated into?
I think we've probably got slightly more manufacturers than distributors, and it's interesting to see the different sides of the house. There's a lot of conversation, as you know, going on around content, right? And you all are spearheading some of the conversations in the space. And on the manufacturer side, it's how do we expose that content to our distributors and customers? And on the distributors side, it's how do we get that content? No, not in a PDF, but in actual web usable format, right? So it's interesting to actually be able to see both sides of the house and figure out how do we help support the needs of either one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have a perspective on this, but syndication, the content syndication and the content aggregation. So syndication being manufacturing, aggregation being kind of distributors. That's still a relatively large problem that's gone unsolved in this technology world.
100% agree with you. It's actually pretty amazing how difficult it is for a lot of distributors to get quality product information from their manufacturers. And then their retail customers, so manufacturer, distributor, direct to consumer retailer, that wants to merchandise those products has just as difficult of a time of getting it from the distributors as from the manufacturers, right? You look at a variety of different industries. Let's take industrial pumps, exciting space. But if you are in industrial pumps,
it kind of sucks, or blows, depending on which way you say
it. Good one.
Thank you.
So in that arena, the distributors are very often asked around a lot of really detailed questions around specific pumps because the end customer is building them into some sort of solution. And somebody has to be able to easily provide that information. And I think a lot of distributors have a difficult time getting that information. And I think the manufacturers have a difficult time sometimes giving that information in a usable format to the distributors. Now, we're starting to see a lot of innovation in the space where that content is getting indexed by AI, and you're able to start getting high quality prompts and high quality tools that extract the information and make it usable in other areas of the supply chain. But there's also, but there are risks with that as well. And the risks come from quality. there's still hallucination of data.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for a specific tolerance in a pump or uh, housing, and AI hallucinates on it, that can have a really material impact
Yeah,
downstream, right?
that's right.
So there has to be a human in the middle. Anyway, I think we digress. But
No, you wrote a piece about a couple weeks ago about how AI building enterprise applications is a myth. I'm curious on your perspective on that. I think what you were saying in general, and that if I kind of recap it, was that AI has abilities to assist developers, but creating enterprise applications or creating full applications, you're still missing so much of the actual work that you needed. You gave some statistics of kind of 30/70. Do you remember what you
yeah,
do you remember what you wrote there?
I can't remember the exact details of what I wrote, but I will probably double down on it. And in the medium term, don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the line, but in the medium term, there is absolutely no way AI is replacing the development of enterprise
Mm-hmm.
applications. And I saw something the other day that SaaS is dead. AI, everybody is going to be able to spin up their own AI apps. I was like, no, they're not. There's so much that goes into it around
Yeah.
specifications and security and scalability and um, diverse user requirements. Within Wasserman, we've got a CRM. There are multiple different groups that have different requirements from that CRM for specific ways of how we sell to customers. So I just don't see people building their own CRM
Yeah.
systems using AI or e-commerce systems using AI. There's just too much complexity.
But I think on the flip side of that, you have the ability to set up an infrastructure for a project in seconds, like all the access to the database and the tables and insert, write, read, to a database, some simple forms. Like you have this ability to create a framework very, very quickly. And I think that's what you were advocating. You said 30% of a project is typically coding. 70% is all the other stuff, requirements and testing and refinement and functional specifications
Yeah.
and which you're absolutely correct in. And you said that both can be assisted by
Mm.
AI, but they need that human intervention to make these, very, very specific design choices. And I don't mean just like UI design, but design choices about what's going to be made, which
Yeah.
I just thought it was a really interesting
Mm.
take. How do you and I have talked a couple of times about this. So many times in companies, I call it the cute little web store syndrome, where a company has a cute little web store. That's how I say it. It kind of gets pat on its head once a month. It's more of a project that someone did. How do you guys view making this a program? Making e-commerce a program, and what does that even look like? What does a program even look like?
It's the program versus project, right?
Yeah.
It's well, I think there are a lot of companies that see the opportunity in e-commerce, but have tried something small without a lot of organizational weight behind it,
Mm,
without a lot of organizational focus and budget. And when we look at any successful e-commerce initiative, it is not a project. It is an ongoing program. It may be composed of individual projects, so your launch project or your loyalty program project or your punch out project, but you need to look at it as a program with a roadmap where over time you're going to constantly improve the capabilities based on, at a point in time, understanding what your customers are looking for and providing it to them. And we've seen that with all the most successful companies. Take a look at Granger. Granger spent billions of dollars on building out their capabilities. It hasn't been a one and done project. It's been an
mm-hmm.
ongoing evolution of their e-commerce storefront. And they've seen results based on it. Take a look at MasterCard. That site was not built overnight. That's
Right.
been decades building out a really comprehensive market leading
Custom
capability.
and custom too.
Yeah, yeah. So when we look at small company stores that aren't getting a lot of traction, we often look at, is there investment in it? Is it a priority? Is that a channel that is important? Like we've got customers that say, we'll have a web store, we'll have a small number of parts on it, and we're okay with that because everything behind the scenes is going to support things like customer login so that they can see all of their information lookup through really sophisticated search. So it's less of a e-commerce store and it's more of a customer portal. When our customers want to see if we've got inventory on the product, they will log in, and they have to log in, and they will see the inventory, and they'll see which warehouse has that inventory, and they'll see their pricing of it, and they'll see the expected delivery timelines that we can meet to get them that inventory. So customers still may not purchase online. The customer may place a purchase through the ERP system, which sends an EDI order across for the fulfillment. So just because there isn't a lot happening on the store doesn't mean it can't be an important part of the ecosystem.
So you talk about a Grainger spending, lots of resources and dollars on that. You guys work with that, sub-billion-dollar company. What's your message to them about their ability to compete digitally with the larger companies out there with, more resources?
You have to have a ready defined differentiation strategy. And you have to really focus on how do you work with your customers to get more spend. So if we take an example of the MRO supplier that I was mentioning, they've been crushing it. They have online ordering, they have punch out, they have EDI, they have 20 plus physical locations, they have vending machines in customer facilities, and they have customer white label purchasing sites. So somebody logs in off of the corporate internet, they place an order, it's actually placing an order through a white label version into their backend. They also have some really innovative capabilities around tying into customers' HR systems, identifying job codes for somebody. So let's say they're working with a plumbing company, and it's a national plumbing company, and each one of the employees has the ability to get certain safety equipment. They have an allowance where they can get a new pair of boots and 5 sets of gloves every quarter. That's tied into their systems, and it's an innovative way for them to get all of their MRO purchasing from this large plumbing organization. And they do negotiated pricing, and they do tie into their backend systems, but that reduces the risk of a Grainger or an Amazon taking their business because they're tied directly into the customer's backend systems, and they've got a reduced friction purchasing process. Because think about the other side of it. Let's say each one of those employees needs to order their gloves and their boots. They can either order it and submit an expense and get reimbursed, and then you have to track those purchases somewhere else. Or you could have central purchasing do it and then send it out to those individuals, or you can have the person do it themselves and they can deal with it themselves. So the company's been really innovative in streamlining their processes and figuring out how they can best serve their end customers. It's really cool to see.
Amazing. Graham, how do people get a hold of you and Wasserman? What's your preference for how people contact you?
Always feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So it's Graham Lubie. I don't think there's anybody else.
No other Graham. You're the only Graham Lubie out there.
I think so. The other one is if you go to digital.teamwas.com and just submit information there.
Excellent. Very good. This is amazing, Graham. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing. I'm more than love it as a team. I love your approach to this, your very pragmatic approach, educational approach, consultative approach to how you deal with customers, but everybody around you. Yeah. So really, really appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Justin. This was nice chatting with you. It's a complex space. I appreciate what you all are doing, the B2B Association, bringing more education and more awareness to the opportunity for manufacturers, distributors, and also helping highlight how an agency like Wasserman Digital can help move the needle for customers. So thank you.